of International Chess School. In this video lecture I will show you a game between the Grandmasters Stezhner Rudolf and Portish Lajos. It is a very good example of how to defend actively. In fact, in this game Black was under an assault right from the beginning. This is why I wanted to show you the game from the beginning. And during the game I will show you examples of moves which are absolutely necessary in the arsenal of a defender. It started with e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, a6. The Kan variation or the Paulsen system is a very flexible system, but rather passive, and White can gain the space advantage right from the beginning, which in this game the Grandmaster Stezhner actually did. Bishop d3, an aggressive move. With this move, White shows his aggressive intentions. He already takes b1, h7 diagonal under control in case that Black castle short. Of course, castling long is not an option for Black. In this system, usually the king is pretty safe in the center, but when he decides to put the king safe, Black will castle short usually. Bishop c5. Black is using the immediate consequence of White's last move. He wants to deflect that powerful knight from the center, and because White has a central pawn and Black has none, at least Black wants to deflect that central knight and to take control over the important d4 square. Knight b3, bishop a7. He has a pretty passive approach, but at the same time this bishop, which already lost two moves, is bothering White after the short castle, when he will like to increase the space advantage with f2, f4. This will require another move, king h1. Short castle and knight e7. Again, Black chooses the flexible continuation. He doesn't want to allow e4, e5 with tempo, which will happen in case of knight f6. Knight c3, knight bc6. This setup is specific for Taimanov system. And White at his turn uses the fact that the knight is no longer on f6 and he plays queen h5. He wants to coordinate the queen and the bishop attacking h7, so Black's next move is almost forced. Knight g6. White continues aggressively. Bishop g5. He wants to provoke f6, which would be a serious commitment and actually a blunder. Think twice before you make such impulsive moves, because it weakens the knight from g6. In this case, the knight will be vulnerable. It takes two pawns, f7 and h7, to consolidate the knight from g6. Queen c7. The ideal square for the queen, and an important element here. We have the central squares, which are e4, e5, d5 and d4, but the immediately important squares are f4, f5, c4 and c5, and because these are the adjacent squares near the center, and the queen from c7 takes under control f4, and the other two, c5 and c4. Look how black is organizing his defense around the dark squares in the center and on the king side. Rook ae1, short castle, and king h1. White is already ready to push f2, f4. It's a critical moment here. White has brought almost all his pieces near center and near the king side. He has a certain lead in development because black didn't develop bishop c8 and rook a8, which is typical for the Kan-Taimanov variation in the Sicilian defense. But black's pawn structure in front of the king is intact. The pawns are still on the initial positions, and white's pieces, despite their nice looking positions, are not so well coordinated. At the same time, gathering the troops on one wing is also involves a higher degree of commitment. Black here has to be objective and to realize that he's in defense, and he has to defend somehow, or at least to decrease white's attacking potential immediately. The question that arises is how to defend using active or indirect defense, or the passive or direct defense. As you already know, the passive defense or the direct defense involves simply holding the lines, responding to threats. But the problem is that here we have no direct threats from white's part. It's very difficult to defend because we don't know yet where white's attack will come. We have a certain focal point on h7, but besides that, we don't know where white will gonna attack. On the other hand, the active defense or the indirect defense is related to the idea of counterplay or a counterattack. It involves activating the forces with the help of the forcing moves. So when you are thinking about the active defense, the indirect defense, you should consider the forcing moves first. And the aim of the active defense is to keep the attacker so busy that he fails to pursue his attack to its conclusion. When the passive defense guiding principle is economy in defense, which means taking minimum risk, avoid superfluous moves, and to make as few concessions as possible, the active or indirect defense main rule is timing. It has and should be executed at the right moment, and this is the moment. Such critical moments are difficult to spot during the game, but we can use two criteria to discover these hidden moments. First moment is when the direct defense has reached the limits that economy allows. Now, for example, d6 will create an unbalance, since after f2, f4, white will be able to bring the rook in the battle. Rook f3, rook h3, and it will create a local force of superiority. And the second criteria, when we can't defend in economical way, is to discover the moment when the opponent made a strong commitment in attack. Now all white's pieces are ready for the attack, so I have to launch the active defense immediately. And I know that white will push f to f4. I need a forcing move, and this is not f4. The active defense launched at the proper moment. Black wants to deflect the queen, so it means reducing white's attacking potential and to prevent f to f4 at the same time. White played queen g4. Now black is confronted again with a difficult decision. What I have to do to exchange the potential dangerous attacker from d3, or to keep the knight on f4 in order to prevent f to f4. The bishop from a7 did his job, so black played bishop b8. Black is defending actively and keeps the knight f4 on the board, creating threats against the focal point h2. It is interesting that because of this domination on dark squares, typical for the Taimanov system, black can regroup his forces with the help of forcing moves. e5. A good move, which opens b1 h7 diagonal. It threatens bishop f6, using the fact that the g7 pawn is pinned and the rook is vulnerable in the absence of the queen. But at the same time, this move is a committal move in the center. It breaks the potential phalanx f4, e4, and will enhance the power of a pawn thrust like d7, d6, or even f7, f6 later on. Now, of course, knight takes d3 would be wrong because of bishop f6, g6, queen g5, simply threatening queen h6 followed by queen g7 mate, knight e7, sacrificing the knight. It gives the knight back with the idea of playing knight f5 after queen h6, but white can simply play knight d4, and then he can go on with his plan with queen h6, mating the lonely king from g8. So black has to be careful, and now he switches back to the passive defense. He played knight g6. It is the economic principle here. Black is attacking the e5 pawn at the same time and prevents bishop f6. So it's a multi-purpose move, even if it looks like a retreat. f4. It is well known that the defender should react in the center as a response to a wing attack. Now black has to use the consequence of white's last moves and to use the rigid pawn structure in the center determined by the committal move e4, e5. d6. This is positionally justified, and the idea, the reasoning behind such a central pawn thrust is that after the destruction of the attacker's center, the defender will have better prospects in the following battle. As once as the pawns disappears, the actual central squares will come under the defender's control. This is very important. At first sight you may think that it's not so useful, but if the attack fails and the defender holds the center, he will have better prospects in the following battle. Queen h5 back. It is obvious that white should try to pin the knight from g6 in defense of the h7 pawn, and besides the fact that he tries to coordinate the bishop with the queen, he will try a rook lift. Rook f3, rook h3, or the other one, rook e3, rook h3. D takes e5. Now it is difficult to decide which rook move is best. White preferred rook e3. He wanted to keep the rook from f1 defended. He's preparing rook h3, and now we have another critical moment of the game. How should black continue? To defend actively or to switch back to the direct passive defense? The answer is simple here. Black doesn't have forcing moves, as h7, h6 will mean a weakening, a severe weakening of black's king position. He played f5. This move has a triple role. In the first place, it closes the diagonal of bishop d3, which loses the attacking potential on d3 h7 diagonal. On the other hand, it takes control over the important central square e4. Look at how the knight from c3 is restricted. d5 and e4 are well controlled. And after rook h3, we saw the third idea, king f7. This is a typical method of the direct passive defense. And this method is called altering the castled position by moving the king. And this can be done in three ways. For example, when we have the long castle and we do a consolidating move like king b1. Or when we have the short castle and we do a move like king h8 to get rid of a pin along the g5. In the second case, we have a king self-defense. When the king is moved, like in the present position, the position of the king on f7 is called a semi-castled position. It can arise also from the initial position when black plays king f7. And the third method is simply a king flight, when the king goes in front of the castled position and he tries to gain material or to find a safer square, but of course preventing the immediate mate is the first reason for such a king flight. So in this case we have a king self-defense move. Black is offering the h7 pawn, but after a first variation like queen takes h7, rook h8, queen g6 check, king takes, rook takes h8, e takes f4, bishop takes. Black can return the material back with a better endgame. Queen takes, rook takes f4, bishop takes f4. At the next moves, black will play rook b8 followed by bishop d7, and his advantage will lie in the pair of bishops and the active position of king g6 compared to the passive king from h1. So as you can notice, it is much more difficult to defend than to attack. You have to calculate precisely and to alternate the active defense with the passive defense. White played f takes e5. Probably g4 was interesting here, but black can use the immediate consequence of white's move. White wants to use the pin along the f file. He wants to deflect the f5 pawn from controlling e4, but it weakens the long diagonal, and black can use this, playing b5 when after g takes f5, e takes f5, not d5, queen d7, we have a very complicated position. If white plays not b6 here, queen b7 followed by not d4, and white's king is in trouble, but white can play simply c4, bishop a7, again preventing not b6, and takes g1 square under control. So the effect of bishop b7 will be enhanced. A very complicated position in this case. White wanted to avoid such committal moves like g4 and play f takes e5, not c takes e5. Black managed to clarify the central squares, and now he has e5 under his control. e4 will be controlled after he gets rid of the pin along the f file. d5 is controlled by the a6 pawn. So if black manages to repel white's attack, he will have a better position in the center. Bishop f4, pinning the knight. It threatens bishop takes e5. Now black is using again the economic principle, which states that we don't have to have superfluous pieces. In this case, the queen from c7 and the bishop from b8 do the same job. So queen e7 releases b8, h2 diagonal for the bishop. Not e4. White is playing creative, but the king is pretty safe on the semi-castled position on f7. h6 defends against knight g5. Bishop takes e5. If rook g3, now we have another method to defend passively, is the method of elimination, which states that we have to remove the most dangerous pieces from the board, the most dangerous attackers. Queen h4, bishop e2, hoping for queen takes h5, bishop takes h5, when we have a double pin here, and the knight from g6 will be in danger. But with king g8, again, king's self-defense save all the problems. Now white has a lot of hanging pieces, the queen, the bishop from f4, and the knight from e4, and black's position is just fine. After h6, white tried to reduce the number of defenders. Bishop e5, bishop takes e5, bishop c4, again an annoying pin, white's initiative is taking place on the light squares, while the dark squares are dominated by black right from the beginning. How to defend actively now? There's no way to defend passively. King e8 or king g8 won't solve the problem. King e8 will simply lose the knight. Actually, both moves will simply lose the knight, and it's very difficult to defend against rook takes f5. So searching for the forcing move is the key for the active defense. Remember that I told you that the defender has to bring forces with the help of the forcing moves in defense. b5, rook takes f5, king g8. Now the bishop is hanging, the rook from f5 could be hanging at the next moves if the bishop moves, and we notice weakening of the first rank, and these are the consequences of the committal attacking play. Rook takes f8, queen takes f8. If queen g6, the game will be unclear. After b takes e4, not bd2, c3, b takes e3, rook b8. Black has the pair of bishops, and he manages to activate all his forces. It is true that white's attack still has some steam after rook f3, queen e7. So we can consider as a balanced and clear position this one. After queen f8, white played rook f3, queen d8, bishop d3, defends the bishop, closes the d file. What to do? Again, try to use the method of elimination. I want to get rid of this powerful queen, and at the same time I want to create threats. Queen h4. The knight from g6 is untouchable, not because of queen e1, because of queen h2 mate. Queen takes h4, knight takes h4. The difficult part is gone now. Black remained with a pair of bishops, a dominant bishop on e5, a weak pawn on b2. So the rest of the game was in black's favor. Rook h3, knight f5, knight ec5, bishop takes b2. Instead, black took the material advantage. Bishop e4, rook a7, rook d3, threatening rook d8 check. Bishop, rook c7, g4, knight e7, rook d6, bishop e5, rook b6. And the question is now how to break white's pieces coordination. It seems that our bishop from c8 is terribly passive, and these knights are extremely strong. Bishop d4. Again, the forcing move in defense will do the job. Knight takes d4, rook takes e5, h3, rook c4, rook d6, the only move, e5 using the pin, knight c6, knight takes c6. Now white realized that bishop takes c6 will fail due to the rook takes c6, rook takes c6, bishop b7, skewering the rook from c6 and the king from h1. So rook takes c6, rook takes c6, bishop takes c6. Black has an extra pawn, and his king will be the first to approach the center. King f7, c3, king e7, bishop e4, king d6, a3, king c5, threatening king c4, bishop d3, e4. Now bishop takes e4 is not possible because of king c4, and both queenside pawns will fall. Bishop e2, bishop e6, king g2, bishop c4, bishop d1, and e3. White resigned because there's no defense against the threat of e2, bishop takes, king takes, and then king c4, king b3, and one of these two weak pawns will be lost. In conclusion, the importance of the center must be emphasized, as the critical step is often made in the center. The defender must pay high attention to the central pawn structure and to the immediate consequences of the opponent's moves, since attacking moves involves a high degree of commitment. I hope you enjoyed this game. Till our next lecture. Bye.